Hello, I'm Betty Swann, and welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you get help for the tough decisions in your life. Tonight I have a great guest. He is a graphic designer, and his name is Felix Palao. Felix, I'm so grateful for you to be on this show because I think you're going to have a lot to say to people. I think you're going to be able to say things that people identify with. And so let's get started.
Thank you for having me, Betty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're a great guy. Now, tell me where you grew up.
I was born up the block from here, actually, St. Luke's, Roosevelt. Now it's known as Mount Sinai West.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that when I walked into the studio.
Actually, I grew up between Hell's Kitchen, the neighborhood that we're in, and I also grew up in the Bronx, New York. I grew up in the North Bronx at New York City Housing Department, New York City Housing, Parkside Houses.
Is that like projects up
there?
I
grew up in the, nice way of saying the projects. That's where I grew up at.
But what do they call it instead of calling it the projects?
They just call it New York City Housing Authority. They just call it Parkside Houses, so it doesn't look like a project.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, a lot of people grow up in that.
Yeah.
And yet that doesn't seem to hold them back. Some people think if you grow up in the projects, you're going to always be a failure. You're never going to do anything with your life. You're never going to step out. But that's not true, is it?
Absolutely not, because of the simple fact that I got an opportunity to go to college because I lived in the projects.
How did that happen?
It was part of because of the fact that I went to Bronx Community College. I played soccer for 2 years over there. And, you know, me being a project kid, they kind of wanted to give me an opportunity to go to school and really live out the dream that I had wanted to, you know, achieve.
Yeah, I think that it's that old saying about when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then just go outside and just start selling them at the stand.
Right, there you go. That's the entrepreneur thing.
Exactly. And I think the projects, they really do set you up for that, for having a sense of entrepreneurship. You know, you learn how to hustle. You learn how to outwork the next person. You learn how to have hunger because of the fact that you want to get out of those four walls. You want something better for yourself. You want something to last. And you want to, you know, you want to get out of the rut you're in at that moment.
All right, let's say somebody's watching this show right this minute. They've just turned it on. They just go, now what's this all about? What kind of wisdom would you say to a person who thinks, I'm stuck here, my family's always been here, my grandparents, I'm stuck here. What would you say to them about getting out?
The word always tells us that the beginning of all understanding is the fear of God. So I think that there has to be an understanding there as well, because the Lord is going to show you what to do.
Wait a minute. Now, what does the fear of God mean?
The fear of God is just, you know, obedient to Him, you know, yielding to what He tells you, you know, living your life for Him. And
it's not being afraid of God.
No, absolutely not. I think that we grew up with that fear. That was the fear that we grew up with. Sometimes we can only relate to the Lord and how we relate, you know, to each other. And because, you know, someone, may fear another person, they're not going to fear the Lord. They're just going to be in reverence to Him.
So when you grew up in the projects, was your family Christian?
My mother was Catholic. She was a holiday Catholic. I think that's the term.
Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I call them holiday Catholics. No disrespect to the Catholic Church, by the way. I actually grew up Catholic.
Sure.
And I was baptized at Sacred Heart of Jesus Church on 51st Street, up the block from, you know, our church offices at 414 West 51st. My grandmother, you know, she got here from Ecuador in the 1960s. Very devout Catholic woman, would take me to service with her every week. And
how old were you when she did that?
I would say about 4 years old.
Beautiful.
And it was just time that I got to spend with my grandmother. May she rest in peace.
I'll tell you something, Felix. I have a worldwide ministry, and I'll never forget the Sunday I was in Belarus, which is a former Soviet Union, Easter Sunday. And there was a grandmother there with her flowers, and she had her little grandson with her. And it touched me so deeply because I thought, all over the world, thank God for grandmothers.
Amen.
Because they have gotten those kids in church. There's just something about a grandparent. They think, I got to get this kid with God.
Exactly.
I've got to get him there.
And you know, I am thankful for the fact that she used to bring me to church every week. Like, I knew who God was. I just didn't know who Jesus was.
Right.
I knew the sacrifice, but I didn't know who Jesus was in person.
You didn't know Him.
I didn't know Him at all.
Well, how'd you get to know Him?
I was a denier for a huge chunk of my life. I would say from the ages of 4 to 16, I was active in the Catholic Church. I just started reading things. I would want to say almost to the age of 14. I was just coming back and saying to myself, the Catholic Church really isn't lining up with what I'm reading in the Bible. It's not exactly lining up. It's more tradition instead of scripture. There were a lot of scandals going on at the time, with a lot of child abuse going on in the Catholic Church. So I did a lot to separate myself from that. And ultimately, I ended up declaring myself an atheist at the age of 16. I was studying with some Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way, and that pushed me away even further because then it was more of a legalistic dogma that we have to follow. And, I kind of learned that that's not the real way to follow God.
It's not at all. When you think Christianity is rule keeping, you've missed the whole deal.
Yeah, because we don't follow the rules of man, we follow God.
And God's heart is so full of love that anything He says is wrong, even if the whole world says it's right, it's wrong because God knows it's going to ultimately hurt you.
And
there's going to be some kind of pain and destruction with it sooner or later.
There's a reason why we have boundaries as Christians, because we're protected. The word always reminds us that.
There's a Bible verse that says sin for a season is pleasant, but afterwards it ends in death. And I've experienced that. Have you?
Yeah, because I was living a lifestyle before I got saved where it could have been, me catching STDs or, I was a very promiscuous person, before I met my wife, even before I met Jesus. And it was just those, going to get those STI tests every 6 months and, kind of living in fear. Do I have anything, or am I, is it going to be something that's going to end me because I'm living this lifestyle?
And it could have.
It could have,
because it does happen to people. So God was really watching out for you.
Amen. I'm happy He did.
Yeah. Well, now, who were the influences? So you said at 16, you suddenly started looking for God again. No, you said I'm an atheist at 16. Well, how old were you when you started saying, I'm going to follow God?
It wasn't until about 4 years ago in which I found Jesus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, how old are you now?
I'm 40.
All right, so at 36,
yes,
from 16 to 36, you were out on your own, is that right?
20 years of my life. I was, I moved out of my mom's house when I was about 24, was living on my own. I was in a relationship. That's when I moved out of that apartment, and that relationship came to an end about 2009. It was a lot of searching during that time, I had read about every sacred text in the world that I can get my hands on. Just really trying to make some sort of semblance of, are we, is there a God, or what's His name, or, if God's, if He exists, why is all this happening in my life? It was a lot of that.
The bad stuff, why is all the bad stuff happening?
Exactly.
And what was the answer to that?
I don't know if I was really looking for an answer back then.
But I mean, looking back now, what was the answer?
The answer was Jesus, plain and simple. Jesus walking into my life, and that was, to me, was the catalyst for all that. I'd say, in 2012, that's when I had met my wife. And she, at that point in her life, she had given her life to the Lord, and she was kind of nudging me. I had already started asking a lot of questions at that point. So, I would ask her, I'd come pick her up from church. I didn't work too far away from here. So, what did you guys discuss this week? Oh, that's pretty interesting. Oh, wow. All these, I'm just peppering her with questions.
But not going.
Not going. So, in December of 2012, my wife had gotten really sick. And she was in the hospital. She had to get her hemoglobin count back up again. And she was very weak when she left the hospital. She goes and asks me, I want to go to church this week. Could you kind of sort of help me come to church? I was like, all right, just pump your brakes a bit. I don't know if I'm ready for this, right? I don't know if I want to be around the Jesus freaks right now. But, here I go. I don't want to be around the Jesus freaks, but I become one myself. Okay, and it's just the whole thing of where when I walked into the sanctuary, I just felt this inordinate amount of love coming my way. It was like this big 10-foot wave, and it was just I had to acknowledge at that point. I didn't make that commitment. I didn't answer the altar call that night, but it was an experience where I go from being a skeptic, questioning when I walk into the sanctuary. A half hour later, I find myself asking, all right, God, if you're real, show me who you are. And lo and behold, He showed me who He was. And He keeps showing me.
How did He do that?
The first real experience that I had after I had said, God, if you're real, I just felt someone right here touching the shoulder. And I look back.
You felt that?
Yeah, I felt it.
And nobody was there?
No one was sitting there. And I look at my wife. I go to her, what's going on here? I don't get it. And she just smiled. And I just remember Pastor Bruce Ho. He was the first person to really, give that word. And I just heard how the love was being, just transmitted through his voice. How God's love was really coming through in the word he was preaching. Don't ask me what he was preaching that night, but what I will remember is that love that was just coming from him.
And really, that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of words. And sometimes words are exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time, it's that you need to feel that love.
Exactly.
I felt that way. I was a skeptic, and I was scornful, and I just thought I was so smart and so sharp, and I knew more than they knew, and they just were uneducated or something. I don't know what I thought. It was a bad attitude. But when I couldn't deny that love.
Yeah. I think that we go through our life and we start asking ourselves, why are we not loved? People have been rejected their entire life. They don't know what true love is. Now, before I came to the Lord, I was already being given ministry. I was already I'm given, so many responsibilities inside the church. I had started coming to church and I said, this is what I want, and then I eventually got into the youth ministry with my wife. We go up to Lake Champion, and the kids are just having the time of their lives that week. And I had always been a fan of that one movie by Mel Gibson, the Passion of the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Always been a fan of that movie, but it got to a point where they showed that one scene when Jesus is tied up to the pillar and they're beating him with the scourge. And I just heard the most quietest, the most authoritative, but the most tender voice I've ever heard in my life. The voice saying to me, all this I have done for you, my son. You are mine, Felix.
Wow.
And that was the night which I told myself, I can't deny you anymore. I give my life to you freely.
And that was about 4 years ago.
I would say, yeah, about 4 years ago. I'm coming up to it on July. Yeah, in July it's going to be 4 years.
So how's your life been since then?
It's been a roller coaster. No one lives a perfect life. We know that. And there's been a lot of trials, including employment, including housing, family members. There's just been a lot of trials, but through every trial, you just got to dust off the shield and keep it moving because the Lord is making something better out of you.
And you can tell it.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about that T-shirt. Kind of straighten that out and let's see. Humble.
Stay humble.
Oh, stay humble.
Stay humble with 1 Peter 5:6.
Yeah, where'd you get that T-shirt?
This is actually created by me.
Oh, really?
The Lord has made me a custodian of something that is so excellent. I've been an artist all my life, so I came before the Lord last summer. I asked him, Lord, so what's next? What do you want me to do? I'm ready to serve again. And he goes, I'm going to give you an answer. And so I start speaking to my one of my cousins. He's a pastor at a church in Washington, D.C. in that area. And he just, we start kicking names around. I always end up talking to him about ideas and stuff. And, I just rested on the verse, Mark 10:44. I love the way the King James says it. Whosoever shall be chiefest of all will be servant of all. And that's where I got it, servant brand.
Servant brand.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the name of it.
Yes, ma'am.
And what kind of T-shirts do you make? Is this the only one you make?
No, I have a line of about 11 T-shirts right now. I'm now going to start designing towards my spring line. Mm-hmm. This is how I want to reach people who are out in the street, the late night people, the guys out who I see on the street on 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue. This is how I want to reach out to them. I want to make art that is appealing to them, but also has a message. It's kind of duplicitous, but something? This is how I'm going to reach my people in the street.
And have you tried it?
Yeah, it's just, I have people ask me, hey, where'd you get that T-shirt at? Oh, well, something? Let's get the conversation started. This is the reason why. And every design that I have on the website is going to be reflective of something that I experienced in my walk. I have
give me some examples.
I have an example. One example would be this one design that says, love one another. The verse says, this is how the world will know my disciples if you love one another. That's one design. And then something that the Lord gave me, he gave me this word called Phileos. Brotherly love and how we need brotherly love more than ever.
So your T-shirt's going to have Phileos on it?
Yeah, I have Phileos.
And people ask, what does that mean?
Well, that's how you start the conversation.
Is that a hamburger?
hey, it's just as good as a hamburger. It's brotherly love,
Yeah.
So I think that it's more of a tool just to get the conversation started. The Great Commission tells us, go out and disciple the world. Well, some people, may be a bit more introverted than others, and this is just another way to start the conversation about Christ.
Mm-hmm. Now, these guys on 9th and 10th Avenue, who are these guys?
Well, growing up and, part of my life in Hell's Kitchen, I just see it all. I'd see, pimps, hustling their prostitutes, or I'd see just drug dealers, peddling what they're peddling. A lot of people of questionable, sexuality, and just, seeing what they're going through in their lives. Why are they going through what they're going through in life? I think that a big part of me has a heart for the people, and not just judging people, but really finding out why they're in the situations they're in.
Mm-hmm. Do those people ever just talk to you about their life and see what you have to say?
And not as recent, because of the fact that I haven't been hanging around Hell's Kitchen as much lately. Mm-hmm. But in my everyday life, it's a lot of people who just, hey, who's God? Who's Jesus? I'm going through this. Can you pray for me? It's things like that.
They'll ask you that?
Yeah, I've had people just walk up to me, hey, listen, man, I'm going through something. Can you pray for me?
And is it because you had that T-shirt on that they knew to say that?
I remember one time that I did that. I had my coat on. I was just walking. I'm walking on Broadway, and some guy just stops me. Hey, can you pray for me? I'm like, I don't know you, but of course I'll pray for you. And it's not a problem for me.
Now, how did he know to say that to you?
I have no idea. Maybe he just saw the Jesus in me.
That's what I would guess.
Yeah, the Jesus in me just shines bright.
I think so. I can see it in your face right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and isn't that amazing that you went from an atheist to
I went from someone who didn't believe, someone who denied, and when the Lord took me back, He said, "No, you're gonna go hard for me. You're gonna defend me. You're gonna speak for me." And that's what I feel like the Lord's been doing ever since I came out that water. He's just been using me in these great ways. Oh, you're talking about
getting baptized.
Yes, getting baptized.
So you got baptized as an adult, even though you'd probably been baptized as a child in the Catholic Church,
yeah,
right?
of my free will as an adult, yes.
Mm-hmm. So kind of explain that. There's people watching this going, wait, you're a big guy? You're a man's man?
How did I fit in the tank? Yeah.
Yeah. How did you think that was something important?
Well, to me, if I'm going to live a life, I'm going to live it hard, or I'm not going to live it at all. And to me, this is one of the most important, if not the most important decision of my life, was to follow the Lord. Mm-hmm. So this is my way of identifying with Him dying at the cross. And the old man dies and the new man just came out the water. Mm-hmm. It's basically me identifying myself with the sacrifice of our Lord and Savior.
Mm-hmm. And so it had a lot of meaning.
A lot of meaning. And I did it in front of the youth.
Oh, really?
I did it right in front of the youth. I had to tell them, listen, this is what giving your life to the Lord is all about. I want you to see this. I want you to experience it. Now, are you
still working with those youth now?
There was a season where I wasn't working with the youth. Now I'm going to be going back into that ministry, so that's going to be an awesome time.
What do you like about working with kids?
I always say this to people. If someone had reached out to me, 16, 17 years old, talking to me about Jesus and what Jesus did for me, I probably would not have led the lifestyle that I led from the ages of 16 to 36. If someone had cared enough for me and had poured into me how I want to pour into these young kids, these are kids coming from broken homes. These are kids coming from poverty. These are kids who just want to, are confused sexually. A lot of kids who want to really have these big dreams that they want to achieve. And, I feel like the Lord uses me to just help them achieve their dream.
Okay, now I think you need to go into that, because I think there's some people watching right now. There's people that want to help people do that, and then there's people watching this show going, man, how do you do it?
just by doing it. Our faith is activated by action. If you just go out and help somebody, you don't know who you're helping. Paul wrote something about, I was in jail, but you didn't visit me. This is how we know, by giving this love, this is how we know that we're followers of Christ. Mm-hmm. We're showing His love to people. Mm-hmm. We're mm-hmm. showing His grace and His mercy to people. And I think that if you just want to help, you got Google, you got the phone book, you can find out places where you can go help. That, you not being able to do one help. If you just think you're one person, that's not a valid excuse. You're mm-hmm. here to help.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to go back about your wife. She was already a believer.
Yes.
And then she had a big influence on you. Mm-hmm. Well, how'd you meet her?
We met on a dating website, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a dating website. We both had a profile on it. And this was during that really promiscuous time in my life, and I go through it. She hit me up first. She sent me a nice little message saying, "Hey, what's up?" I'm cleaning it up a bit, but hey, what's up? That was the actual message.
Yeah.
And so I look at her profile. She's pretty. She's a very pretty girl. And she kind of let it know that she was a Christian when we first started dating. I was like, it's not really my thing, but I respect you. That's what you believe in, and if that's what you believe, then fine. I'm not going to infringe on that. I wasn't like a militant atheist. I respected the fact that people worshipped.
Yeah, but now you've been married 4 years, right?
No, actually, we make 3. Yeah, we're coming up on the 3rd year of marriage.
3, So what is the best thing that you have seen about being married?
The best thing that I have seen about being married would be the simple fact that I wake up next to my best friend each and every day. When I say that, I really mean it because of the fact that, her and I, we continue to develop this relationship in which we know each other that well. And she knows my likes, she knows my dislikes, she knows why I do what I do. And she knows me a lot better than a lot of other people have ever cared to know me.
All right, but now talk about you're legally married.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, why is that better than just living together?
Because of the simple fact that this is what the Lord wants us to do. The Lord created marriage for this, to be a partnership. I lived a life in which I was not married to somebody and living with them. And I thought everything was all right, but it wasn't the same as being married.
You can tell a difference?
Yeah, there's a whole different dynamic to that relationship.
I think because God wants us to be married, legally married, I think there is a blessing that He puts on the relationship that people miss out on because they don't go ahead and make that total commitment.
Exactly. And I was, when I was living in that type of relationship, I was missing out on a lot myself. It wasn't so much a monetary thing, but it was more, that dynamic something was just missing. I was just there.
You could feel it?
Exactly. I could definitely feel it. It wasn't the same as, you can call someone wifey or something like that, but it's not the same as calling them your wife, of having not so much the obligation, but entering a covenant to care for somebody else. That's a very big thing.
Okay, well now if you were going to give people that are watching this show advice, I want to kind of go through just a few things that you've talked about. We've talked about what you would say to somebody in the projects, that you can get out, you can succeed, you can be something. What would you say what would be your advice to somebody that's right in the big middle of maybe living a promiscuous life, they're living a life that they're not proud of, but everybody around them is living the same kind of life? What advice would you give somebody that's watching this show?
I would just let them know that they really need to re-examine why they're living that lifestyle. Were they rejected when they were younger? Were they not loved? Is there something that they're fighting, and whether it be a personal addiction or any sort of substance abuse? Just really evaluate why you're living that lifestyle. What are your benefits? What are the risks of living this lifestyle? And if the risks are outweighing the benefits, I would say that maybe it's a good time to lead that lifestyle. Although, at the time, the pleasures of sin are always fleeting. It feels good at the moment, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is that you're putting your life at risk. I know personally when I was living that lifestyle, I didn't care. I didn't have any regard for women. I didn't respect women. I didn't, it wasn't anything that glorified God the way I do now. It was very much like no regard for women whatsoever, basically.
Now, why didn't you have a regard for women?
I had been hurt by women my entire life.
Okay, see, that's real important.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about the challenges and what you've learned and the wisdom you can share, kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Basically, it was me not treating women the way I would want my mother to be treated, the way I want my sister to be treated. I want those are the two most important ladies in my life. I want those women to be respected.
Now you do.
Of course, now I do.
But you had been hurt,
yeah,
and it turned you against all of that.
Yeah, it really did, because I didn't see the value that I do now when it comes to females. Like I only thought that women were good for one thing, which women are not just good for one thing. They're good for everything else that comes with it. Not only, being someone who can dress you or tell you your cologne smells bad on you, all those things.
Or buy you cologne.
Exactly. So, women have a far greater value, than I ever imagined. And I think that marriage did teach me that.
And do you think a godly marriage is teaching you that?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow, really good. Well, all right, now let's move on through your life and get you to about 36, or 40. And there's people watching right now that are night people. And you're a night person, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a night owl. I get a lot of my work done at night.
All right.
Bothers my wife, but I got to do it.
Yeah, and so how are you in the morning? Are you kind of a deadhead?
Yeah, if I wake up at like 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, oh man, I can't wake up.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to get up.
All right, so you're really moving forward in your life now, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can tell it.
Yeah, I really feel that the Lord has been really going out of His way to show me how much He really wants me to get a lot of things done this year.
All right, so folks, you heard that. You heard a very honest conversation, a guy saying, well, I've tried it a lot of different ways. I've had reasons for why I didn't like women, reasons for why I didn't believe in God. And then things began to happen in his life. He met the right people. He began thinking a lot about why did he have the questions he did about God, and he hung in there till he began to get answers. You can do that too. You can say, God, if you're really real, show me. Show me some way. And if you do, I will believe in you, and I will give you my whole life for the rest of my life. I promise you that'll be one of the greatest things that ever happened to you. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV tonight. I hope you received some wisdom and that you have a great rest of the night, whether you're going to sleep or you're going to work. I'll see you next time. Bye.